Welcome back to the Corner of Story and Game, your podcast that explores the intersection of storycraft and game design. I'm your host, Gerald Ford, and today we have a special guest returning to the show, Willem Delventhal, founder of the Indie Game Academy and a visionary in the indie game development community. Willem is here to help me bring 2024 to a close and ring in 2025 with his crystal ball. All wizards have one of those, right? We'll discuss the positive and encouraging trends we anticipate in the coming year. So let's dig into it. Willem, thank you for joining me.
Absolutely. So excited to be back.
So I was sitting down, I was thinking to myself, you know what, I'm going to wrap up 2024. You know, it's been a crazy season 2, and I want to bring it to an end by looking forward, because that's what I like to do. And I could think of nobody better than the wizard himself. And I hope you brought your crystal ball, because I want to talk about 2025 with you, my friend. Ooh, those effects.
Can you edit that in for me later? Can we do a little sparkle or something?
I'm going to say yes, but no.
Yeah. You know, I've been working. I really want to figure out some kind of conference-safe, like, poof effect I can hide in some sleeves. Maybe some glitter or something. Confetti cannons.
Glitter's hard to clean up, man. Just sit your flash powder. Just
right. Amazing.
Oh, so cool. All right. Well, before we dig into what we think of 2025 and what's coming down the pipe.
Yeah.
Not everybody has heard episode 53 of this season and get your full backstory there. But for people who are new, who just jumping in, give me a quick, hey, this is who Willem is, what you're up to, and Indie Design Academy. Tell me about the Academy.
Yeah. Rapid fire. I'm a video game developer and largely designer and now educator, I guess. And I've been working in the space for well over a decade. I got my start way back on pen and paper when I was really quite young. Used to make board games instead of book reports. Amazing. I sort of accidentally sold a Flash game to addictinggames.com, if y'all remember that. And that was when I went, oh, this is a career. And I've been pursuing it since then. I have largely worked as an engineer and then a designer in the educational space. So make educational games, help people understand how to do life via video games. And these days, I now work heavily in UGC and still EdTech, as well as running the Indie Game Academy. I'm kind of known. I've been building this brand half accidentally, half on purpose, the Wizard of Games. Basically, I help people break into the game industry, and I just make it fun and interesting and exciting, and I try to make it as approachable as possible to work in this space. And largely, the Indie Game Academy is how I do that.
Nice. Excellent summary of the much longer and very interesting story. People really should go back and listen to the whole thing, because that's a good story. So, all right, well, let's look forward, shall we? Further on, I got three. I figured I'll narrow us down to 3 topics that we'll gaze into the crystal ball about. First one, is
that's the crystal ball sound effect. Oh.
I'll have to go find a sound effect now. Now you're making more work for me.
Sorry. I'm not sorry.
Yeah. Okay. Serious. The first major trend that I want to talk about is this rise of AAA-lite games, or high-quality titles that are developed by smaller teams, more manageable budgets. Seems to kind of bridge the gap between indie and AAA. So, in your opinion, what does this trend, what impacts are going to have in 2025, and does it bridge that gap, or what's the space for real indie games still?
Yeah, it is an interesting trend. I've also heard, I feel like this is one of those things that is fairly new, because there isn't really established terms, or people are sort of talking about the same thing in a bunch of different ways. Like, you'll also hear people talk about this as double I, like the equivalent of double A, but I, or even triple I sometimes, which is all a bit silly, because like even indie versus double A versus triple A isn't that well defined, and mostly we just use that to refer to budget size. But yeah, I think undeniably, regardless of what you call it, there is this trend where indies are sort of filling a gap because of the major fallout we've been seeing ever since the pandemic in the game industry. AAAs and big publishers have become much more careful. They're pulling back a bit on budgeting. VC funding in the game space has dropped by about 75% in the past year. Pretty wild. And so the only games that are really getting approved and launched are the really safe bets, for the most part anyway. That's not quite entirely true. But a lot of AAAs are definitely being more careful. They're releasing sequels and trilogies and games that they know will do well, as opposed to really taking risks. And as a result, indies, as always, are the ones taking risk and are the ones innovating. But it seems like even more so that's happening now. And into 2025, I predict that there's sort of this new hole of what you're describing as like a AAA-like or maybe a double I, where indies can fill a new, more complicated space where it's still about being innovative, but it's a little bit more about being polished and fully featured, being a nice, big, expansive game. There's a couple of a couple examples of games that really did that well. Animal Well seems like it's really like
Yeah.
trending, getting ready to do exactly that. When all it really is a platformer, but it innovates in small ways that make it exciting, and it's really big and expansive, and like at least seems to be promising us a really wonderful delivery. Sea of Stars is one that I came up with here that I think is really beautiful. Took the JRPG genre and just cranked it to 15. And then this is sort of a controversial indie. I'm doing air quotes for the listeners. Helldivers 2. Helldivers 2 is an indie. That's an independent company. And regardless, they had a huge budget, but still they self-funded. And so it is technically an indie game, and that is absolutely a AAA quality, indie game, undeniably so. So I was doing a little bit of reading on some other people who are talking about similar things, and I ran into this term that I'll throw out as the last point here, which is simultaneously nostalgic and innovative. And I think that is kind of the new indie. Indies have always been innovative. But the hole that they seem to be hitting really well right now is, hey, remember that game that you loved? We're rebuilding it, but like 10 times better and near AAA size.
That's smart. That's very, very clever. Where do you think team size? Because people hear the term indie, and if you understand the industry, you understand that it has less to do with actual team size and other factors. But creatively speaking, in 2025, what do you think those small teams, like you hear about like the Dave the Divers and Stardew Valleys, and those small teams that come up with clever indies? Are we going to see more of that, do you think?
Yeah, that is an interesting question. So to put the record straight, Dave the Diver is not technically indie. Dave the Diver is the controversial opposite of Helldivers 2. Regardless of that point, though, yeah. So I actually don't know that team size will significantly change. What I'm seeing change is there is even more self-funding, and then there is a ton of revenue share teams and a ton of volunteer teams. I started like a year or two ago, I started to run into teams of juniors that were doing this strictly for experience. They were just banding together and like releasing a game, sometimes for free, sometimes paid, but oftentimes like not really expecting any financial gain out of it, but like building pretty impressive titles just together just because like, hey, I can't get experience anywhere else, so I'm going to do it on my own. Ruby Shark is maybe the first example of that I ran into. And that's a team of 70 people working on a game together just for the experience. So I don't know that team size will really change. I think the wild card here is definitely AI. And I think probably for the most part, even though AI is scary, and I get it, and it is scary, and please let's band together to make sure it's as ethical and responsible as it can be. I actually think AI favors the indie more than the AAA. Because AAA has a certain expectation of quality that AI, at least at this time, can't really hit very well, versus indie. If I just poop out some beats from, an AI some AI service out there, like oftentimes that's good enough for my game, and that actually doubles down on my efficacy as an individual or even as a small team. So I'm not sure if team size will change. It might get a little bit smaller, but what I think definitely is happening and will happen more and more is that indies are sort of shirking the publishers and saying, well, I can't get them anyway, I'll do it myself.
Right on.
Yeah.
It's the punk rock of games.
Heck yes. I actually love that. Yes. Let's make that a thing. Hashtag.
Done. Okay, well, let's move on to number 2 into the crystal ball here. Sorry. I forgot to leave space for the special effects. User-generated content. Jumps to mind for me, obviously, is Fortnite and all the crazy things that are being done inside of that engine. But user-generated content has become a powerful force for community engagement, evolving gameplay, all kinds of things. In your opinion, What are some of the best ways that developers are going to use this in 2025 to empower players, create new games? Where is this going?
Yeah. All right. So I love UGC. Not because it was a trend, just because it kind of happened this way. UGC is actually one of my sort of tried and true, like most experienced areas of design. So yeah, just to make sure that the if anybody doesn't know the term, UGC stands for user generated content, stands for sort of modding, any form of the ability for your users to contribute consumable content for other users to get in your game. So in the olden days, that meant modding, and
Mhm.
mostly exclusively modding, and it still does to this day. But we're starting to see uber applications of UGC. UEFN, Unreal Engine for Fortnite, is essentially just a gigantic UGC platform.
Yeah.
And we've seen other games do that too, like the whole freaking Halo modding community. Sims, for that matter, which is where I'm working right now, is humongous. And somehow they did that with no tool support. And then Roblox is the other like gigantic one right now.
Yeah.
So, yeah, this is definitely an interesting question. It's sort of a technical question, how the individual creator can get UGC happening in their game. There's a couple of things to do. I think the number one is just the tool. Um, the if you look at what just happened with Baldur's Gate 3, where the team doesn't want to work on the IP anymore, and so they've just kind of like let it go. But before doing so, they incorporated tooling to allow you to create modding for that game. It's a really fascinating example of where you empower your community to make the next iteration of content on your title. And they have for the most part, they've released a pretty powerful tool set. But then on the opposite side of that spectrum, you have something like The Sims, which never released any tooling, but there's still such a healthy, incredible, honestly, community of modders out there. But really, if you are a developer looking to get UGC incorporated into your game, you can't expect that to happen, to be totally frank. So the first thing for you to do is to build really healthy, user-friendly tooling to allow people to create content for your game. And I think that happens extremely early. If UGC is a part of your plan, which not all games are right for this, by the way. But if you believe it's part of your plan, and if you have good testing and you really feel confident that's part of your plan, what I recommend you do is make your tools right away and then make your whole game inside those very tools. Because that'll mean that you are constantly testing those tools. You're empowering those tools. You're like, oh man, I really wish I could do this. And then your engineers make some new tool and suddenly that's available to your users. And that way you and your users are building sort of the tool set together. And you're really you're making your game absolutely as friendly for UGC as possible. I think one of my last 2 points here are to encourage exploration and empower your super creators. So what you'll find oftentimes is you'll have a small population of people who crank out crazy consistent content for your game. And when you find those people, absolutely empower them however you can. So showcase their content, congratulate them, make cool rewards, call them into one of the things that I see a lot of people do that's really simple is have a little pool of almost like moderators or something that are your most prevalent creators. Meet with them on a regular basis, talk to them about what they're most excited about, and make sure that they're truly involved in the process. And then the last one, and this is maybe the biggest one, is I think if UGC is your play, you need to be prepared to release creative freedom. EA is another, because I'm working on The Sims right now, it's on the mind. They have clearly never quite liked the idea of mods, despite the fact that a huge part of their success is mods, because they lose control, because it's harder for them to sell DLC packs, which is how they monetize now, if other people are releasing similar things for free. So what I think for UGC to really work in a game, you need to be able to say, this is something like a Dungeons and Dragons where we've created a world, but we don't care so much about what actually is in this world. And in fact, we're excited to see what the individual creates inside this world. If you're not prepared to release some percentage of what your game becomes, then I don't think UGC is right for you. And it's a lot more about collaborating and connecting and empowering your community to tell your story rather than you holding all of those cards yourself.
Makes total sense. Brilliant, man.
Yeah.
I'm going to age myself, but I remember working in the Aurora tool set back on Neverwinter Nights, and that was incredible. Is there any And there may not be an answer to this. Is there any companies in 2025 that you're keeping an eye on for UGC? Is there anybody you think is going to do a really good job of it?
That's interesting. So I don't know. I don't know if there's anybody that I'm like, oh man, they've got it all figured out because we're kind of all trying to figure it out right now. Um, Obviously, though, UEFN, Unreal Engine for Fortnite, and Roblox will continue to be king, I think, and are honestly a completely fascinating, completely separate genre of game. I don't think anything else will touch them in the near future. Um, their entire metaverses into and of themselves. It's pretty fascinating. So they're just interesting. If you want to go, that's your one-on-one to go learn UDC. Go check them out. Play some of the games by creators. I do like career consultations with people all the time. I've talked with 15-year-olds who are making hundreds of thousands of dollars making Roblox mods. It's like wild.
Wow, I gotta go.
Yeah, I'll try that out. Regardless, though, there's a couple of other cool ones coming up. I actually think this is absolutely not confirmed. I don't have any insider information. This is just me guessing. EA recently announced that they won't be making a Sims 5. And so I'm wondering if they're about to try a UGC play and to turn The Sims into an ongoing, evolving ecosystem rather than any kind of sequeled game. So that might happen. We'll see. Check it out. Another one that comes to mind is Ready Player Me. Cross-compatible content companies are kind of a thing now. So Ready Player Me is an avatar service where you can make avatars using their software, and then they have sort of translation services that allow those avatars to work across multiple games.
Cool.
Yeah, so that kind of thing is really interesting. And the last one I'll mention is the people I work for right now. It's a small startup, but they are called Mod Collective. And what they're trying to do is what we're calling premium generated content. Basically, we make mods that are as good as DLC, regardless of the developer. We don't need your permission.
Very cool.
Yeah.
The big, huge purchase that Disney made in Epic, that'll be interesting to see if that's in this space, whether that's part of it. But I mean, nobody knows. Well,
yeah. I think it's sort of a no-brainer, especially actually given the complexity of working in the game industry. If you can empower other people to make money in games, even if it's little tiny droplets of money, even if it's little project-based things, I think that's all good. Like that's part of Mod Collective strategy. They pay per asset and often, and at most per project. They don't really have staffed people. So you come in and you make a cool chair for The Sims and you make, $50 or whatever. But even that is applicable work. And then also there's so many people out there who that's kind of perfect for. Maybe they're between jobs or whatever. They just need a little bit of cash and work on something cool.
Very cool. It'll be fun to see what comes out of it.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's move on to the third and final gaze into the crystal ball. And this one is, I'm sorry, space for the special effects. So the push for inclusivity and diversity in gaming has gained significant momentum, rightfully so, and I'm glad for it. As a storyteller and a world builder, how do we approach creating narratives, designing games, creating characters that are representative and authentic? And what does it see in this space moving forward?
Yeah. So big question, deep questions. So I think the first thing for me to mention here is one of my favorite learning moments in recent memory. I have a good friend, a mentor who I worked with at Paradox Interactive, where I was doing the lore for their life sim game, Life by You, and I was telling little bits of story in this universe, and I was adding little lore bits that you can find across the world, and you can find out how this town formed and all kinds of stuff. And one of the stories that I was telling was about a lesbian couple who had been separated by sort of Romeo and Juliet equivalent, like their families didn't want it to happen and blah, blah, blah. Yep. And I sat down with him to do a review. I was like, all right, here's the story. This is what I think is going to happen. It's going to be really cool. And the very first thing he says to me is, Willem, do you think that you should be the person telling this story? And that was a pretty good learning moment. And I think is the answer to a lot of the pushback on people who feel like this is being forced down their throats. I am a mostly straight white male, and telling the story of a lesbian couple is not one that I am capable of really telling authentically. So I think that's the first thing I would say here. There was all that pushback recently, like the biggest one that comes to mind here is the Dragon Age Veilguard controversy. There was all that controversy around how it felt like that was very forced and inauthentic. And I would hazard a guess, I don't know this for real, that a lot of the people writing those stories weren't the people who were actually experiencing the stories they were attempting to tell. So I think that is maybe the first thing I would say. It is good inherently that we are pushing for greater diversity and inclusion. 100%. No doubt in my mind about that. But I think we also want to be empowering those people who are actually experiencing these things more than we are. And that's a little bit harder. It's harder for me to go, well, shit, it was so hard to get this job and now I can't even do this lore part. What am I supposed to do? But in this case, I just found some writers who actually were excited to tell this story. And all I really did was kind of go, here's what I'm thinking. What do you think? And then they told the story. So I think that's the first thing I would put out there. I think the reason you get things like that controversy surrounding Dragon Age is exactly that. When you don't allow the people who are actually experiencing these things to tell the story. That said, just to make it very clear, I don't really care that they're pushing an agenda, and I'm still in support of Dragon Age Veilguard, and I still want to see these kinds of stories told, even if we're shoving it down people's throats. Because goddammit, there are so many games out there for straight white dudes, and it's okay if we're pushing the agenda a little bit. That's all I'll say.
Right there with you, Betty.
Yeah.
Right there with you. Okay, well, that wraps up the 3 questions, but I want to know about the Indie Game Academy in 2025. What's happening with that?
Oh, man. I'm so excited. All right. So a lot of things. The Indie Game Academy is my pride and joy. It is a fascinating example of a company that got started for no other reason except quick cash. I was teaching for somebody else, and they were taking all my work for very little money. And I was like, screw it, I'm going to do this myself. But it has evolved into such a beautiful, wonderful flower of an organization and a community. And it expands at an ever-increasing rate. And this year, we've got a lot coming up. So the biggest thing, the most important thing on the mind is the Indie Game Foundry. We have these core 3 programs that we run, IGAs level 1, 2, and 3, that are all about basically getting you up to speed, working on a team, and getting you sort of the holistic process of releasing games. The Foundry is the next step after that. The Foundry is us taking the best of our students and helping them actually found indie game companies and put together teams entirely on revenue share. So no money involved at all, no dollars, and then bringing a game to Kickstarter and then launching that game, and actually founding a company as well. And we're doing this with all of the goodness that we've learned from our core 3 programs, which largely involves, making it heavily project based, making it heavily interdisciplinary, and then bringing in tons of very experienced professionals to just sit down with you and talk about, how to do this thing right. We're doing an experimental cohort. We're calling it Cohort 0. So we're only taking 3 teams, but applications close literally today, actually, at the time of recording this. So by the time you hear this, they'll already be closed. Sorry.
Too late, yep.
But we'll do more in the future for sure. And looking at the applications already, I'm just really pumped. It is 110% us going, okay, we think we've learned enough to do this for real money. And we want to prove our sort of ongoing mission statement is we want to prove that outcast junior game developers can make exceptional games that make real money for little to no funding. And we think we can do that. So that's the big one. That's what I'm pumped about.
I got chills, dude.
I'm so ready.
So
hashtag Indie Revolution.
Ooh, we got 2 hashtags today.
Yeah, I guess so.
People who want to apply for that, although it's too late now, but for next round, they have to have completed the first 3 courses in order to apply for the Foundry?
No. That is always something that's important to us. So every level of our programs, the requirements for that level are always satisfied by the previous level, but are not required. Okay. So for the Foundry, you are required to have released a game with your co-founders, which level 3 fulfills, but you can do that without us 100%. So we've got tons of applications for this first one, and maybe I don't know, 2/3 of them are students, but there's totally people from the outside, and we are absolutely considering them. We don't want this to be only our students. We want to be empowering people. The whole idea here is that we're working with earlier stage people than most publishers or accelerators would. We're trying to also make it people first. So we are having you pitch a game to us so that we kind of get a sense of your thought process, but it's more about you. We want people who are cool and excited, and that can help us prove this mission statement.
Very, very, very cool.
Yeah.
Okay, what else are you up to?
There's other smaller stuff. We're just expanding our offerings. We're finally going to do recorded classes, which people have asked for forever. We've stuck to live only for the longest time because, frankly, recorded classes can be terrible. Just for a little bit of trivia for you, on average, a recorded class has a 5 to 10% course completion rate, but our live classes have an 80 to 90% course completion rate. So we are going to release some smaller Udemy courses, and we're actually going to have a backend for our students as well, so they can track which courses they're doing. And we're going to build a little bit more of sort of pathways for individual career tracks, so you can get a little bit more like meta support rather than just coming to one class with us. And then this is not quite confirmed, but I think we're doing it. This is a bit of a pre-spoiler for the next question. I just got invited to speak out at IGDC in India, and it was so cool. I think actually one of the coolest experiences of my life. And we are almost certainly going to start offering at least some small classes out in India, and that's going to be sort of the breadcrumbs for our, getting things all over the world instead of just being US based.
That's so cool. That's incredible, man.
Yeah.
Well, I will take that segue you handed me so nicely and lead us into the next question. And really, this one's just for fun. I want to know your top 3 games you're looking forward to in 2020.
Yeah.
I've got mine ready to hit you back with, but let's hear yours.
All right, I'm ready to hear yours too. I am freshly back from India, and so two of the three are Indian games. But that's fine. That's good. We're cross-pollinating. 3 games that I'm excited for. The first is Detective Dotson from Masala Games. The creator of the company, the founder of Masala Games, is actually one of my very first mentors. When I was at Lumosity, my first professional job, he was there working, and he was one of 3 people who really helped me understand how to do game dev. And then after about a year, he actually moved back to India. But I've kept a good relationship with him. I got to go and hang out with him at IGDC this year. And so he's a really inspiring story just by itself, first of all. He founded Masala Games about 12 years ago, and for 10 years straight, it was just a contracting firm. He was just whatever the hell I can do to bring in money. But in the last 2 years, he's actually building and launching his first IP, which is called Detective Dotson. It is this freaking adorable detective game. It is set in authentic India. It's not like ancient India where we learned about Shiva and stuff. It is just, this is India, and you're a detective here. It is just steeped in Indian culture. In the demo level, you're a detective detecting stuff. You're trying to find where the groom went at a wedding, and when you successfully find the groom and bring him back to the wedding, it turns into a dance sequence, and suddenly it's Bollywood, and you're hitting notes to the beats. And it's an adorable little game, and I can't sing its praises enough, and I just wish Shaolin so well. So that's my biggest one. Go check out Detective Dotson. They're also doing cross-industry release. They are releasing an hour and 20 long movie along with their game, because in order to make the animations as high fidelity as they wanted to for their game, they basically already made a movie. And so now they're just making a movie. Pretty cool. Second game is from an even smaller developer, still from India. His name is Pekru Pienyu. I think I'm saying his last name correctly. And he's the founder of Redimension Games, and he's making a game called Sojourn Past. It is it's sort of like a bullet hell meets Hyperlight Drifter, something like that. But it is just absolutely beautiful and atmospheric. I got to play it for the first time at GDC this last year, US GDC, and totally fell in love with it and fell in love with Pekru. He's this very reserved, quiet, humblest dude on the planet. Was one of my favorite games I played at GDC that year, and he just is he was just excited to show me his game. So I've been following his journey, and I got to meet him at IGDC again. and his game has come even further in progress. So check out Surgeon Past. And the last one, this is entirely selfish, and that is Doom Dark Ages. It looks dope. That's as much as I need to say about that. Yeah.
Well, my list is not nearly as cool as yours. Mine is way more mainstream.
It's fine.
Subnautica 2. I am
Oh, yes.
Subnautica 2.
That's a great answer.
This way. Dune Awakening. All over that one. And then my third one, it's not confirmed for 2025, but there's whispers. So Light No Fire. I am pumped to see what they do with Light No Fire.
Okay. I'm less familiar with Light No Fire, but Dune 100% for. And yeah, Subnautica 2.
Yeah.
We'll see, man. I bet it's going to be good.
They're going to be so good.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, my friend, that's kind of it. We're going to end 2024 and season 2, and I appreciate you coming and helping me do that. I guess I normally open up some space here for you to highlight or promote. We've talked about the Indie Game Academy. Everyone should go check that out. Is there anything else, or where can people find you online?
Yeah, not really. I mean, come and check me out. The best place to follow me these days is LinkedIn. Look for Willem Delventhal. Indie Game Academy, definitely check it out. We run classes all the time. We're running more than we ever have next year. And the Indie Game Foundry is in an experimental cohort. We're talking potentially about launching another cohort mid next year, but we may wait all the way until 2026. Regardless, you can check it out at indiegamefoundry.com. It's definitely early days for that specific program, but it's looking very promising. And the last thing I'll shout out here is the other company that I'm working for, Mod Collective. It's a cool little initiative. It's basically, trying to empower those like micro creators. And we're doing these really cool episodic releases of DLC level mods with a bunch of creators who just work on that one thing and then, move on to the next thing.
Very cool. Is Mod Collective been around for a while? Is there a lot of inventory, or is it just...
They've got a decent amount of stuff that they've already released. So they're an interesting story. They actually are the original founding team of something called the Sims Resource, which you wouldn't really know unless you're a heavy Sims modder. But it is one of the original modding sites. It's like one of the oldest modding sites and is sort of why the Sims modding ever became a thing. So they're the team that started that. And then they actually sold that. And, now they've come back together for their reunion tour and are trying to do the same thing on a wider scale. And that's Mod Collective.
Very cool. Okay. Yeah. Everybody go check that out. Well, my friend, we're going to wrap this up. We're going to wrap up the year. Thank you for joining me. I want to actually give you, Mr. Wizard of Joy, the final word for the whole season. You will be the last voice any of us hear for 2024.
The first thing I'll say for that, Gerald, is wow. Thank you. What an opportunity and what an honor. I thought about this because I wanted to make sure it was a good wrap up for the year. There is no ifs, ands, or buts. We are going into an uncertain couple of years. We've already been through an uncertain couple of years, and here are a few more. But in my opinion, the wonder of the video game industry is how they affect us and how they affect our players and turn us into the humans that we are. Never forget that the art that you create in these worlds that you deliver to your players affects the real world as well. What you give to your players is what they eventually become. As a result, I am of the opinion that we need indie game founders and we need ambitious people who are willing to take on the responsibility of creating wonderful, inclusive, safe, and kind spaces. And who are willing to fight for wonderful, inclusive, kind, and supportive spaces. So be good to each other and protect goodness for goodness' sake. And if you are struggling, a lot of us are, you're okay. You can do it. One step at a time, my friend.
And that, my friends, concludes Season 2 of the Corner of Story and Game. What an adventure this year has been. Thank you for being part of the journey, whether you tuned in for one episode or came along for the whole ride. Your support means all the worlds to me. We're expanding, innovating, and bringing you even more epic content. While you wait, swing by our newly launched Discord server. It's the perfect hideout for game design tips, storytelling banter, and meeting your fellow adventurers. And as for why we're taking a break, well, the Rogues Guild decided to dig a secret tunnel under the tavern, and let's just say they hit something they weren't supposed to. I've heard whispers of extensive tunnels and some sort of crazy mage. Anyways, repairs are in order, so we're closing up shop. Have a fantastic new year, stay safe, and hey, keep creating, exploring, and sharing your stories and worlds. And remember, Wanderer, your chair will be ready by the fire the next time you stop in at the corner of Story and Game.